Hi, this is Chris Reali, and my paper is titled Legends and Legacy, Musical Tourism in Muscle Shoals. Think about the 20th century American popular music creation stories. Consider the 1927 Big Bang of country music when Ralph Peer discovered Jimmy Rogers and the Carter Family. Or Sam Phillips, owner of Sun Records in Memphis where Elvis first recorded. Phillips is often credited with inventing rock and roll during the mid-1950s. These stories provide simplified versions of often complicated events that serve as rallying points for local communities to celebrate and promote shared histories. In the case of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, the creation story, the legend of the Singing River, was in place long before the mid-20th century flowering of the local recording industry. A nascent recording scene developed in Muscle Shoals in the mid-1950s. During the ensuing years, numerous performers recorded many hit tracks primarily at two recording studios, Fame and Muscle Shoals Sound. The Muscle Shoals music scene achieved significant commercial successes and acclaim by the late 1960s. Yet, the creation story only recently became integral to the promotion of the region's musical history. Over the course of 60 years and the production of thousands of recordings, the Muscle Shoals music scene has itself become legendary. The Singing River legend attained more popularity during the 1990s, and county tourism boards foregrounded the Singing River as part of their marketing strategies to attract tourists to the area. But the term only entered the vernacular after the 2013 release of the documentary, Muscle Shoals. A host of local businesses now use the phrase in their names. What was once a myth has become a brand. This paper examines how the Muscle Shoals region exploits myth and memory to attract tourists seeking authentic cultural tourism experiences. Cultural tourism relies on a mixture of tangible elements such as historic sites, as well as intangible elements including music and myths. The Singing River myth, promoted in conjunction with tours of legendary recording studios like Fame and Muscle Shoals Sound, ultimately serves to transform and reimagine the Shoals as a holy site. The region known as Muscle Shoals, Alabama, includes the cities of Florence, Tuscumbia, Sheffield, and Muscle Shoals. Nestled in the northwest corner of Alabama along both sides of the Tennessee River, the Shoals is approximately 28 miles east of Mississippi and 18 miles south of Tennessee. Although some have traced the origins of the so-called Singing River legend to about the 1820s, the earliest published version, The Legend of Muscle Shoals and the Story of Florence, appeared in 1917, written by Mrs. Emmett O'Neill, the wife of a former Alabama governor and a Florence native. On July 6, 1917, the Florence Times printed an excerpt of her pamphlet under the headline, Mrs. Emmett O'Neill's Interesting Letter. The impact of this pamphlet upon the historiography of both the Muscle Shoals region and the local music scene there has been profound. "All ye who doubt, listen to the legend of Muscle Shoals," exclaimed Mrs. O'Neill. According to the pamphlet, the Cherokees believed that in the infancy of the world, the Great Spirit imprisoned the goddess of the Tennessee beneath the rushing waters of Muscle Shoals while her lover, the Prince of the Power of the Air, hovered above. Throughout the ages, the prince whispered his love upon the perfumed evening breeze, while she smiled back through 1,000 summers and murmured tender secrets beneath myriad southern moons. Only with the appearance of a human mighty magician, who, with a wave of his wand, would bring together these spirits of water and air. Then would flow such a rain of peace and plenty as had never before been known on earth. O'Neill's flowery Victorian-era prose is a significantly anglicized version of a so-called Native American legend, marking her story's origins as highly speculative, and the word singing does not appear in this version of the legend. The mighty magician for Mrs. O'Neill turned out to be modern science and the engineering needed to complete what would become known as the Wilson Dam. The likely purpose of O'Neill's pamphlet was to spur interest in completion of the dam, which began in 1918. As a former First Lady of Alabama, Mrs. O'Neill's pamphlet exerted considerable socio-cultural influence as it circulated through the press, social circles, and beyond. 3 years after the pamphlet's publication, The Legend of Muscle Shoals appeared in History Stories of Alabama, a source adopted by the State Board of Education as a fourth-grade textbook and used at least into the 1950s. By 1952, a newspaper editorial exclaimed that the textbook should be read by every child and every citizen of the state. At some point, the legend of Muscle Shoals and the legend of the Singing River became synonymous. Starting in the late 1980s, William McDonald, former historian of Florence, wrote articles on the city's history, the Singing River, and Native American cultures that frequently appeared in the local paper. These widely circulated writings helped to refine and perpetuate the myth. In 1991, MacDonald even predicted the use of the Singing River myth by the local recording industry. One of these popular Indian myths, the Singing River, MacDonald wrote, could easily become part of the music industry's promotion of the sound of the Shoals. This particular Alabama history story unleashed a powerful cultural force that has since shaped the promotion and reception of the Muscle Shoals music scene. The regional success of A Fallen Star, a now forgotten track produced in 1956 by a Florence-based record label, attracted eager musicians to the area. It took several years for this cottage music industry to produce a national hit. In 1961, Rick Hall, owner of Fame, produced You Better Move On, written by Sheffield native Arthur Alexander, that reached number 24 on Billboard's R&B chart. Hall continued to record many tracks for a variety of artists, some of which became regional and national hits. But the release of Percy Sledge's When a Man Loves a Woman in 1966, a #1 R&B and #1 pop smash hit recorded at a studio in Sheffield, put the Shoals recording scene on the map. In 1962, there was one recording studio in the Shoals. By 1972, the area included 8 studios, including Muscle Shoals Sound, where the Rolling Stones, the Staple Singers, and others recorded. From the late 1960s through the late 1970s, acts such as Wilson Pickett, Cher, The Osmonds, Paul Simon, Boz Scaggs, Paul Anka, Mac Davis, Linda Ronstadt, Rod Stewart, Willie Nelson, Hank Williams Jr., and Bob Dylan traveled to the Shoals to record. Many of these tracks are part of America's musical fabric. During the early 1970s, Shoals-based musicians and producers and engineers formed the Muscle Shoals Music Association to promote the local recording industry in the area. One of the MSMA's primary objectives was to raise the profile of the Shoals recording industry among area residents and local officials. In 1975, the MSMA posted a billboard on Highway 43 that stated, "Muscle Shoals Music Industry welcomes you, the hit recording capital of the world." Starting around 1977, the MSMA focused much of their efforts towards the opening of an Alabama Music Hall of Fame. After years of advocacy work on behalf of the MSMA, the Hall of Fame hosted its first induction ceremony in Birmingham in 1985 and inducted Rick Hall, Buddy Killen, Nat King Cole, and Hank Williams. In 1987, a statewide vote approved a $2.5 million bond to fund the construction of a 12,500 square foot Hall of Fame in Tuscumbia. The museum's grand opening took place on July 26, 1990. Cultural tourism, including music tourism, is a subset of the tourism industry. In the case of Muscle Shoals, music tourism involves complex relationships between public and private sector organizations, including active recording studios, concert venues, museums, nonprofits, and convention and visitors bureaus, all vying to draw tourists to the region. Cultural tourism relies on a mixture of tangible elements such as historic homes and sites and districts, and nature-based attractions, as well as intangible elements including music and myths. For Muscle Shoals and other music cities, music tourism becomes a form of nostalgia consumption for tourists where iconic recordings like the ones produced at Fame or Muscle Shoals Sound serve as oral triggers for memory and emotional associations. The various organizations that promote any one region must then negotiate the promotion of what is concrete and what is often indefinable. For locations like Muscle Shoals, notions of musical authenticity are then bound to the connections between myth, the way a region rearticulates or realizes its own importance, and memory, a community's historical interpretation of the past and understanding of the present. Local populations and tourists alike often accept myths as undisputed truths. In turn, myth promotion, such as endorsing the Singing River legend, becomes an important marketing strategy to stimulate cultural tourism. The use of the Singing River as a broadly used marketing slogan emerged slowly. Area resident Tom Hendricks helped generate and maintain interest in the Singing River legend through his self-made monument to his great-great-grandmother known as Tom's Wall. In 2009, Congress officially designated the Muscle Shoals National Heritage Area, which used the phrase "the land of the Singing River" on the homepage dedicated to promote the region. Over the past several years, the Shoals has promoted the legacy of the Singing River in novel ways. In 2010, the Patton Island Bridge was renamed the Singing River Bridge. The second of 4 oversized Singing River sculptures, one for each of the 4 cities in the Shoals, was unveiled in 2014. Tom Hendricks' passion for and dedication to his Native American ancestry has blossomed into something much bigger than the phrase he helped to popularize. Speaking about the Singing River, Judy Sizemore, the first director of the Heritage Area, remarked, "That legend, it's a great marketing tool." In 2011, the director of marketing for Colbert County Tourism wrote, "Whether poetic or prophetic, singing and other forms of music have continued to be associated with Muscle Shoals. Muscle Shoals is music, and music is definitely Muscle Shoals. Influences blend here from the Celtic ancestors and from the hard-working African Americans and European settlers who tilled the soil where hill meets valley along the Singing River." As a rhetorical strategy, this last sentence seemingly connects present-day Shoals inhabitants with not only Native Americans, but with everyone else who settled the region. In an effort to articulate the Shoals' musical authenticity, which translates into an exceptional cultural tourism experience for visitors, this quote also blurs the lines between myth and historical memory. Explore the Shoals, a full-color glossy magazine published yearly by the Times Daily, a Florence-based paper, acts as a tourist guide to the area that promotes cultural tourism. The magazine features articles on a variety of topics including music, historic homes, and recreation in the area, as well as brief stories describing the region's history and many, many advertisements. A few select examples from ETS reveals how the Singing River evolved into a cultural brand and marketing slogan. In the 2009-2010 ETS issue included only a few paragraphs about the Singing River in a section titled Myths and Legends. Quote, "The Shoals has a long history of its connection to music. Perhaps a story passed down through the centuries by American Indians who settled the area foreshadowed the success of the local music industry." The word perhaps acts as a rhetorical wink, indicating the legendary roots of the story. By 2013, the Myths section included this sentence at the top of the page. "Every community has a legendary tale to tell, and the Shoals is no different. Stories and myths from the Shoals add unique flavor to the area and make for interesting conversation." The city of Florence published a full-page ad in the 2012-2013 ETS issue. At the top of the page appeared the words, "Florence, Alabama, Trails of the Southern Soul." The ad included pictures of a fried catfish plate, a musician playing a cigar box guitar, a fisherman, and the O'Neill Bridge at sunset. Text at the bottom remarked, "Let our Trails of the Southern Soul lead you along the Singing River, where a distinctively different rhythm fuels the spirit." At one level, the term Southern Soul acknowledges the musical style that made the Shoals famous. At a deeper level, working in conjunction with the bucolic images on the page, the term suggests that life is different in the Shoals, and that responsibility for the distinctively different rhythm that fuels the spirit lies with the Singing River, a term that receives no further elaboration. The ambiguity of the slogan that fuels the spirit also leaves the reader pondering exactly whose spirit, the tourist or the local, gets fueled by this so-called Southern Soul. Writing in the 2013-2014 issue of ETS, journalist Russ Corey made the connections between music and the river and native cultures explicit. "Music has been a part of the Shoals since the days of the Yuchi Indians, who called what is now the Tennessee River Nunese, the river that sings. The Singing River has long been an inspiration, and in the late 1950s, rock and roll made its way to the area and began inspiring musicians who were starved for a new style of music." This sentence makes impressive rhetorical and historical leaps by simultaneously uniting all music created in the Shoals with native cultures. More importantly, the story retroactively makes the Singing River responsible for local interest in rock and roll. In essence, this seemingly innocuous reinterpretation of the past transforms the Shoals into a mythic place fueled by the transformative powers of the Tennessee River. The legend became the through line of the 2013 documentary Muscle Shoals. The release of the documentary acted as a catalyst for music tourism in the Shoals, and the hidden musical history galvanized the region in a way like almost nothing had done before. The film's opening scene is a slow-moving shot of the Tennessee River, interspersed with shots of water and waterfalls, and the first word spoken is magic, all of which conjures an otherworldly scenario, suggesting a holy sight. The B-roll, or establishing shots of the documentary, frequently show images of the Tennessee River to create visual associations with water for the audience. Time does not permit a detailed analysis of the film. In short, there is nothing subtle about the way the director connects the music of the Shoals to both the Tennessee River and local native traditions. Judy Hood, chairman of the board for the Muscle Shoals Musical Foundation, described the documentary and all the events that followed as a miracle. About 5 months before the movie was released, the Alabama Music Hall of Fame closed on October 12th due to steadily declining visitors over several years and budgetary cutbacks at the state level. The original location of Muscle Shoals Sound sat vacant. After the film's release in September 2013, activity began to pick up throughout the rest of the year. While promoting the documentary, several Shoals-based musicians performed on the October 3rd Late Show with David Letterman. The Alabama Music Hall of Fame reopened on October 18th. Beats Electronics, founded by Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, provided a grant to renovate Muscle Shoals Sound in November. This gesture generated a significant amount of press coverage, with further interest in the Shoals' musical legacy. In December 2013, the Recording Academy announced that Rick Hall would receive the Trustees Award for a significant contribution to the field of recording. "I think anyone will tell you," declared Rob Carnegie, president and CEO of Florence Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau, "the documentary was the shot in the arm that the destination needed." The renovated Muscle Shoals Sound opened in 2017 and primarily operates as a museum, but is also available for recording. From 2014 through 2019, direct references to the Singing River legend in the Explore the Shoals articles decreased. The popularity of the 2013 documentary likely caused a shift in the marketing strategy of local tourism agencies, but the connections between the music and the river did not disappear. The 2014-2015 Welcome essay in ETS simply stated, attempting to explain the remarkable music heritage of Northwest Alabama, the renowned Muscle Shoals documentary eventually concludes there must be something in the water down there. Ads for the Singing River Brewery and Singing River Live, an event venue attached to the brewery, began to appear in 2015, followed by ads for Singing River Dentistry in 2018. In the span of 10 years, between 2009 and 2019, the phrase Singing River transformed from referring to a Native American legend into a branding term used to routinely describe the origins of the local music industry, as well as a marketing slogan to clean your teeth and sell beer. Between the 1990s and 2015, the Alabama Music Hall of Fame and the W.C. Handy House in Florence were the only music attractions in the area consistently open to the public. Susan Hamlin has worked in the tourism industry for over 30 years and been with Colbert County since 1995. Describing the county's approach towards tourism during the 90s, before the Heritage Area designation, she remarked, "Music was not our main attraction. Our biggest claim to fame at that time was Helen Keller and the lakes for fishing, and nobody even thought about telling the story of tourism through music, other than through the Hall of Fame and the exhibits there." Musical tourism is a niche market, and that was especially true 30 years ago. There was also pushback about promoting musical tourism because some city officials were not interested in the region's musical history. At that time, Fame was a working studio. It still is. The original Muscle Shoals Sound location on Jackson Highway was vacant, sporadically operated as a studio and rarely open to the public, or at various times operated as an appliance shop. All the other studios had either gone out of business or were also not open to the public. When tourists visited the area in the 90s, most were amazed and surprised to discover the music history because they didn't know about it before they came there. In the early 2000s, the Shoals faced job losses in the manufacturing sector. Officials at that time then looked towards tourism as a way to attract people to the community, and cultural tourism was a growing segment of the tourism market. Although it took some time, the region developed an ad hoc Alabama music trail, erecting markers at sites such as the original location of Fame Studios in Florence in the early 2010s, with more added several years later. The Roots of American Music Trail, a component part of the Heritage Area, first launched in 2015. It has taken a very long time for the local population to warmly embrace the legacy of the Shoals music industry. During the 1990s and up to 2015, the majority of tourists who visited the Shoals were either from Europe or musicians and music aficionados. The release of the documentary and the acclaim that followed animated the Shoals area residents, businesses, and elected officials about the local music scene. Reed Watson, label manager for Single Lock Records based in Florence, explained how the documentary affected the local music industry this way. The movie is like a BCAD thing for this area. It created a sort of California Gold Rush moment. Everybody that was in the business had realized a light bulb went off and was like, oh, we have tourists now. We need to take advantage of this. That sort of started a whole new kind of industry that I don't think anybody was paying attention to. Speaking about the overall transformation that took place, Judy Hood told me, I think the local community didn't know the story as well until the documentary came out. And what has happened is we used to operate in silos around here. The music business over here, you've got corporations over here, the local businessmen over here. But what has happened is that has all been married. Notions first articulated in Mrs. O'Neill's 1917 very interesting pamphlet have been used by many as a rhetorical strategy to ascribe the 1950s origins, 1960s and 70s successes, and current rebirth of the Muscle Shoals Sound. Now, tightly interwoven, both fact and myth further reinforce what I call the Muscle Shoals mystique. In May 1982, the Times Daily published a multi-part series called The Shoals' Musical Roots that included an editorial note prefacing the first article. The Muscle Shoals area is home to an internationally acclaimed entertainment industry. This industry ensures a name for the Shoals area when the American popular culture story is recorded by future historians. The impact of the industry is far-reaching and its roots run deep. Before and during the early 1980s and continuing well into the 2000s, the region didn't fully understand or appreciate the Shoals recording industry's impact upon the community. Nearly 40 years after the Shoals musical roots stories, the cities of Florence, Muscle Shoals, Sheffield, and Tuscumbia, along with Florence Lauderdale Tourism and the Muscle Shoals National Heritage Area, hired Sound Diplomacy to write the first comprehensive music strategy for the Shoals. The report provided a SWOT analysis that resulted in 38 recommendations. In terms of musical tourism, the Shoals' storied music past puts the region in an enviable position, noted the authors of the report. Rob Carnegie emphatically told me, nobody can take that we are the Muscle Shoals Sound. Nobody can take the Swampers. Nobody can take Rick Hall and the legacy and all the elements of that music history away from us. It will always be ours. We will always own that brand. But the Sound Diplomacy report also cautioned that the Shoals' musical legacy should only provide the foundation for what could become a vibrant music scene. Numerous people worked very hard to establish the Shoals recording industry in the late 50s. Even more people and multiple agencies helped develop it into a valuable cultural brand over the ensuing decades. The Singing River explanation, it kind of ticks me off a little bit, Reed Watson told me, because it discounts how revolutionary and how bold it was for people to think they could start a record business in this area when they did. This town and the story of this town is built upon people just saying, fuck it, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I find that very inspiring. The foundations of the Muscle Shoals recording scene were only laid during the 1950s. Using the legend of the Singing River as a starting point, the historical music timeline of the Shoals originated when native tribes first inhabited the area during the infancy of the world, circa 800 BCE, but didn't become established until 1956. Local beliefs coupled with the larger-than-life physical objects such as the Singing River sculptures have connected the Shoals music traditions to the region's indigenous peoples, effectively creating a nearly 2,000-year-old musical tradition, or in other words, an unrivaled popular music creation story. Thank you.